Welcome to Business Accelerants Memos with me, Paul Menig. We plan to accelerate your success by listening to the triumphs and challenges of other middle market leaders of manufacturing, technology, and transportation businesses. Welcome, everybody, to another issue of Business Accelerants Memos. With me today is a battery company expert. Dragonfly Energy. Wade Seaberg is the Chief Commercial Officer. Thank you, Wade. And, I'm sure you're glad to be here, but tell us just a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I am glad to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. A little bit about myself. So, was an engineer, graduated as an engineer.
I'm sorry.
I
I
know.
was IR one.
I joke with my family that, yeah, sure, I got an engineering degree. I've been in sales my whole career, and I've been in problem solving my whole career, and started with Eaton Corporation right after Purdue. They had a great technical sales development program that I went through. It really taught me a lot of core fundamentals around being a sales engineer. And then went to work for Wesco Distribution after that for a number of years, about 13, I think, in total. And then I branched out on my own as a independent manufacturer's rep agent. Worked for myself for about 5 years. That business still exists. Had about four manufacturers whose product lines I was representing and selling into a myriad of different markets, mainly and primarily the recreational vehicle market. And one of those companies was Dragonfly Energy, and the growth just accelerated very rapidly. And they pursued me to come on board full time, of which I did, with the agreement that, I can still allow this other business to run, called Structure Sales. And as long as I wasn't managing day-to-day operations, they were okay with that. So that's kind of how I got to know Dennis and our CEO and get involved in the Dragonfly Energy business. So I was handling the OEM side of the business, and in Reno they were handling the consumer and retail side of the business, and those worlds collided, which was the strategy that we set out at the beginning. So it's been great. It's been an interesting challenges, interesting to disrupt marketplaces, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that on this call.
I think people underestimate your degree was in industrial engineering, and I don't think people understand how difficult it is for the industrial engineer to take what some design engineer did and then actually create a factory to actually make that cost effectively and go back and argue with the design engineer. Well, we can't do that in manufacturing. We can't keep that repeatable.
Yeah.
So,
I had one internship, and it was with another trucking supplier, Hendrickson. It was in their stamping facility in Joliet. We were making bumpers for PACCAR and all the others. And I had to do myself and the other intern had to do round the clock time studies on the water jet machine that was making cuts into the stamps. And it was really interesting. But at the same time, I was like, I'm not going to be able to be cooped up inside of a factory all day. So I tell my kids and anybody else that may listen that, internships are great because they may turn you on to something that you want to do, but they'll also tell you maybe like, hey, I don't like this, but I'm going to go and be the best at it right now. But it's not a permanent career. It's a 3-month slot, right?
So what was it in the sales training that you still remember today and make use of on a regular basis?
The biggest, like at Eaton, I was on the electrical side of the business, and so there's a lot of different parts that we had access to. Everything from switchgear for a utility station to controls for motor control centers, and then enclosed control for motor starters and things along those lines. And it was, nobody's asking you to be the expert on this product right now. You have a whole team of people that are standing behind you that can back you up and get the correct answer. And it's better to have the correct answer to your customers than to give them something that you think might be right. That was really impactful. And I love, team and individual sports and knowing, okay, you got to do your function and perform that. And the rest of the team has to do their function at a really high level, and the whole team can win here. That was probably the one thing that I've been able to use quite a bit in this current career path, Dragonfly Energy, is having a heart of a teacher when you're selling is really impactful, especially with a disruptive technology. If you can educate a stakeholder within your customer, within your client company, and you can get them to an educated person on a topic is more motivated to talk about it. They feel more confident about it. They're willing to be a champion internally so that your voice isn't the only voice. And that's incredibly powerful when talking to customers. So you're not necessarily always trying to sell or trying to get the trial, trying to get the pilot. A lot of the early ground game is educating on the technology and what it can do and how it works. And through that education piece, you're able to kind of display your expertise and your knowledge and across markets, and then you become a trusted partner.
That there's so many things I'm going to launch on from that. You mentioned team, you mentioned ground game there. So I saw that you've helped raise funds for high school sports
I have
in your area. You must have played sports.
I
Which ones?
I was primarily football. I also played basketball and played baseball and soccer as a in my real young years, but primarily football. And I coach football now when I am in town. I have a good relationship with our local high school, and they take me when they can get me. Which is not often, but I'm able to at least scratch that itch when I'm in town. So it's a lot of fun.
I kind of guessed that football might be from taking a look at your shoulders,
Yeah.
but wasn't sure of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And the other thing you said that I see in all salespeople in general is they have to be trusted. And you said it's better to have the right answer. You talked about the teaching, and you and I did a little discovery process. For me, I always believe there's a better way. I can see complexity and can simplify it, and then I can clarify who does what and by when. Yours was fairly similar. It was you want to simplify things, which might be the teaching kind of thing, that you see a better way then from what you've done listening to the customer, and you want to have trust with them. So it looks to me like that little discovery really did fit you pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, it was really good. I in that discovery session, kind of answered quickly. I think that's how they wanted you to
Yeah,
answer. It was just whatever came to you right away out of those multiple choices. And then I'd move on a couple questions and thinking about one of the previous ones, but I just stuck with it. And it did, it's a summary of kind of my personality and what I look for. It was pretty spot on.
that's good. And hopefully it'll help you along the way.
Yeah.
And maybe you can tell your people that's how you react, and maybe they'll be interested as well. So, batteries. Wow.
Yeah.
My grandson, we went to the Barnes& and Noble, we bought a book, and his mother was my daughter-in-law was a little too concerned that this one book was, for a younger kid because he's 9 years old. But I looked at it and I said, "There's an engineering principle or 2 in here that I don't know." And so the A was for amplifier, the B was for batteries. And so, I started asking, "What do you know about batteries?" Because he's played with them, and I didn't, we have double A, triple A. Is there an A? Yep, there is an A out there, but I had to go onto Wikipedia to find that there's an A and a whole bunch of other sizes that I didn't know about. Wow, batteries.
It's going to be a lot more different sizes in the future too.
Yeah, and yours are everything from 12 volts to 480 and higher probably?
We top out right now at 48 volt, so we don't quite get into the high voltage battery realm, and that's largely our mission is in the markets that we serve. It's disruptive enough to bring lithium into the picture, asking them to go from 12-volt lead acid batteries to 400-volt lithium batteries is a big leap. And also, I think it misses the mark on, we're trying to generate revenue as well. It may be a better solution in the end, and it may be where the markets end up in a decade. But if we want to generate revenue, the clearest path is transition to lithium. It solves their problems today, and it gives them the ability to be extremely comfortable from a safety level on a production floor and in a high capacity environment. So it's 48 volt. Also, when you get from 12 to 48, you can accomplish a lot of storage problems. You have a solution in your tool belt to accomplish a lot of the problems that exist today in energy storage.
You mentioned two words that our audience might not really put together: lithium and safety.
Yeah,
A lot of it has to do with the particular chemistry that you've chosen, so you might
it does. Yeah.
expound on that.
Yeah, so we lithium iron phosphate, oftentimes abbreviated LFP, and this is part of that education curve that we get into with customers, because lithium is a umbrella term, and it captures underneath it a lot of different chemistries. LiFePO4 is how you'll see it in your chemistry class, right?
Mhm.
LFP is another way to say it, but it's been around the longest, and it is the most stable chemistry out of all of the lithium chemistries that we have. It's one that we know the most about. It's also over 50% of all of the lithium cells that are made today across the globe are LFP. So it has great scalability as far as manufacturing cells. And the other big factor that comes into cell production and safety, it comes into safety. Sorry, my brain's working faster than my mouth. Is the form factor that you choose for cells. So you have options. You have cylindrical, you have prismatic, and pouch cells as all the differences. We choose to use cylindrical cells. That gives us. We realize we have humans that are sleeping on top of our batteries in pretty much every installation, or at least 90% of what we do, whether it's recreational vehicle or heavy duty truck, there's a human life sleeping on top. And so we take that extremely serious. The cylindrical cells allow us to present an air gap around each cell, which allows, if you were to have an issue with one cell, it's less likely that it's going to propagate to the next cell and cause a thermal runaway event. With the other construction methods that are available, it's very difficult to accomplish that, and ends up injecting some more expense into the
So innovation, we talked in advance via email about the challenges of introducing innovation, especially into a market like the trucking industry. What are you finding as the biggest objections today, even after you've been at it for several years and won some good locations for your product?
Yeah, the biggest objections, honestly, that we're facing, call it the consumer level, the fleet level, and heavy duty truck, that's who's consuming the batteries, is really just unfamiliarity with the product, right? They're just and a lot of PR. A lot of, they pick up what they read in a headline, and we're all guilty of that, myself included, and things that I'm not educated on. And you read what you catch in a headline blimp, and then you draw your own correlations in your head about it. When we're able to have them speak to fellow clients of ours who have deployed the product in these solutions, they end up getting to a pilot stage, and then eventually over time, we're able to convince them. And I would say the other thing that's a challenge, Paul, is the equipment that our batteries have been are being hooked up to has not had the best performance, but it's not because of those products. It's really due to the lead acid batteries that were powering those products. So they lost a lot of confidence in maybe the electric air conditioning systems that are deployed in trucking today. But it was only because maybe we, as an industry, we over promised what the run times would be with those products. And so then companies went away from them. And so getting them back to testing those products again, they've said, okay, well, we've done that and it didn't work very well. And pointing out, well, your problem really wasn't with the cooling power of the air conditioner, or it wasn't with the inverter itself or anything. It was really had to do with the general energy storage, the foundational level. And that's what we would explain oftentimes to OEMs on the recreational vehicle side. It was, you guys can, as electrical engineers, you guys can design the best electrical system you're capable of, and it can work flawlessly. However, the weakest link in that chain is the energy storage. And when that energy storage is left up to the consumer to put in and select, when they have a problem with their lead acid batteries, they're not leaning on the battery. They're leaning on the unit itself, and they're calling that brand of unit, hey, I had all sorts of problems with it. And it wasn't the fault of the manufacturing. It wasn't the fault of the design. It was the weakest link in that chain, which was the lead acid battery.
So, from what I've seen, lift trucks in the factory are
Yeah.
mostly going 48 volt.
Yes. Or higher.
Trucks or higher, okay. Trucks are still mostly 20, 12 volts, but we have Volvo recently introducing 24 volt, and you're saying 48 volt, which implies to me in the RV industry, it's probably going to have a converter to get down to 12 volts for some of the applications. Am I right or
Well,
wrong?
the biggest obstacle is the appliances that you're like. I think a lot of people would be at 48 volt already. If I think you're going to see within trucking, I think you're going to see a lot more migration to 24 volt over the next short term, less than 5 years, because all of our North American trucking companies have strong 24 volt experience with their European companies that they are responsible for. And there's a lot of accessories, the lighting, the radios, all of the electronics that can run off of 12 or 24 volt. And if there are only one voltage, there's a complementary product already on the market at scale that's in a 24 volt fashion. However, when you go to make that leap to 48 volt, a lot of those electronics are unable to run on 48 volt. And there's not really a good native 48 volt air conditioner today, right? That's efficient. And that's your biggest energy load on the system when it's running. So I think once those appliances, they're able to get 48 volt microwaves, 48 volt air conditioners, 48 volt electronics inside the coach, then you're going to see the adoption of 48 volt batteries. Right now, the advantage to 48 volt that we've identified in the market, because we also are the makers of Wake Speed, which is an advanced alternator regulator. It pairs with a second alternator in a lot of recreational vehicles. It pairs with a primary alternator in a lot of marine applications, or port side and starboard side engines in marine, and then also within work truck environment. And what your advantage is, and that's deployed a lot in 48 volt, because a 48 volt alternator can generate a lot more energy and power. And so we can charge batteries faster. We can power devices faster off of 48 volt than we're able to with 12 and 24 out of a similar size alternator head. So I think you're going to see voltages start to step up, but I think that we'll go to 24 for a rather lengthy period of time, and then who knows, right? Maybe we'll 48 volt and go to even higher voltages.
Okay.
So
And that would be interesting. I know that
who knows?
48 volts is based on a DIN standard in the European Union for safety, where the overvoltage can't go above 64 volts for human safety kind of thing. So that's why we talk about 48 volt for safety. RV market has been a challenge the last few years. During the pandemic, everybody just bought as many RVs as they could, and they built as many RVs as they could.
Yep.
And today I drive by the RV lots and they are full of vehicles that are just standing there. I assume, I haven't looked at the data lately, but I assume they're still recovering from their overbuild.
Yeah, they are. They're still recovering. Some are recovering better than others. Some are figuring out ways to innovate themselves and meet the market where it's at. The market has changed quite a bit over the years post-COVID. We've seen, affordability hit the RV market, just like it has all the other markets. They talk about a lot on Business Channel with regards to housing and things like that. But it's hit RV. We saw the inflationary pressures of tariffs and everything else really impact the overall price of an RV and the price to finance that with interest rates as well. So that, those macro pressures, I'll tell you what though, Paul, like heavy duty truck hasn't been a walk in the park for the last 4 years.
I didn't get there yet. It's been just as bad.
It's been, I really know how to pick 'em. And, yeah, but the RV market, it's a part of the American lifestyle. And, generations were brought up RVing, and those generations are continuing to RV. And it's going to be a strong industry, and it'll weather this storm. I was in it during the financial crisis in 0809, and I thought, man, there's no way we're going to get out of this. And RV has a tendency to be the first in and first out of recessionary periods, and we're seeing that. And right now, I'm optimistic about. I think we're at the bottom for RV. I think that you're going to see, if you read the RVIA Industry Association,
yeah,
any of their public statements that they have out there, there seems a little bit of moderate growth this year, low single digits, and industry insiders will say that that's probably going to be the case for the next 3 or 4 years. I don't think you're going to see a hockey stick curve out of this. You're going to see moderate growth. And what we're seeing though, we entered into that marketplace where everything was green for us, green pastures. Like we didn't have product adoption on anything. And so, really just grabbing one OEM was huge for us. And we didn't care what scale they were at the time. And then, you get a second OEM and a third and a fourth and a fifth. And then you're like, okay, we really got something here. And these were units that were shipping to dealer lots without any batteries at all on them. The RV industry, if you bought a trailer, because of the sales channel and the cycle, like it shipped to the dealer lot without a battery. And then the dealer would sell in a separate transaction. They would sell the batteries to the consumer and install them for them and then send them on their way. And so just convincing, manufacturers, okay, now we're going to ask you to put a really expensive battery on here too. Like, what do you think? That was a real big challenge, but we were able to, the solution and the problem that it solved was brought so much value to not only the manufacturer, but also to its customer. And they proved that their customer is willing to pay for that experience and that peace of mind.
So another trend in the trucking industry, you mentioned that everybody today has a European connection with 24 volts now, but in the RV industry in particular, it's been consolidation.
Yeah.
As many of the small manufacturers, their owners have aged out. There's been a lot of consolidation, Thor in particular, Forest River, a bunch of them. That could be helpful to you, or it could be difficult for you. Which is it and why?
It's been helpful, and I'll tell you what. So early on, right when we went public, we had Thor Industries was an early investor in us. And that initial investment was very helpful for us in getting us off the ground as a public company. But the consolidation's been helpful because it's given, there's the big three, right? There's Thor, there's Forest River, and there's Winnebago. And then but what it's given them is a number of different centers of excellence where they're able to take new technologies and really be exhaustive on their and new manufacturing techniques, not just supplier products, but innovations that they're able to come up with their own engineering team and actually deploy resources to developing those so that their subsidiaries can actually adopt the technology. And their subsidiaries are, for Thor, for instance, Airstream is a subsidiary, Tiffin Motorhomes is a subsidiary, Keystone RV, a number of others. And they are tasked with manufacturing the products and getting them out the door, the consumer side of the relationship. So to burden each one of those subsidiaries with its own innovation center or, those kind of overhead costs is really burdensome. And for a parent company to come in and say, we're going to take this on, I think it's been great for the industry to be able to foster that. And it hasn't blocked out independent innovation from the marketplace. We see folks starting up all the time with an RV. The regulatory standards are still there. If they want to be an RVIA member, they need to prescribe to certain protocols of manufacturing. But I think overall, it's been a benefit to the market.
Somebody's graduating from college now, Purdue, let's say, your old alma mater. What would you recommend to them? What advice would you give them?
Well, I have 3 boys. I have one that's graduated college recently, one that's in college. So this is advice that I give to them regularly. It's the biggest thing is learn how to communicate to people. You need to be able to communicate to people, and you need to be able to deliver your whether it's your innovation, whether it's your idea, whether it's your team's idea, or even if it's outside of your organization and you're in an external sales role where you're trying to convince customers to send you a purchase order. You have to be able to communicate, and you have to have the human skills around making your idea interesting. And if I was telling my middle son, who's in college right now, I said, within your pocket, you're going to have all the answers available to you. By the time you graduate, you're going to have every technical answer that you could ever desire available to you. And it's understanding that and then being able to be authentic in your delivery of that to another human being who are ultimately responsible for making decisions. So that would be the biggest piece of advice. I would encourage anybody that's an engineer to take a couple of communications courses and public speaking and things like that. Really challenge the side of their brain that as engineers we probably don't take those courses in college. I know both of my boys attended small liberal arts schools, and so they naturally were pushed in that direction. Or when you go to pursue a technical degree, you're not naturally pushed in that direction.
So 5 years from now, what do you think we'll see for batteries on trucks in particular?
I think that the entire industry will be transformed over to lithium batteries for storage. I think that on the cranking the engine side, there's still some innovation happening there. And there's also, our solution is selecting the right tool for the right job. And that's how we break it down really simply for, maintenance technicians within fleets is we have an isolated approach. We rely on flooded lead acid batteries to crank the engine, turn over the engine. It does an incredible job at that. It delivers power really rapidly for that engine need. And then when you isolate that, that's the only job we're going to ask you to perform. We're not going to ask you to deep cycle. We're not going to ask you to do anything else. And we're going to select the best tool for the storage needs and powering all of the electronics that are always on board the chassis. And that's lithium iron phosphate. So I really do think the industry's already, one of the great things about the BEV movement was it forced a lot of these OEMs to become a little bit more knowledgeable about the electrical side of the business than maybe they were before. And so it forced them to invest in engineering horsepower within that side of their business. And now that's kind of lost its incentives to pursue anymore, a lot of that human intelligence is being redeployed to the real problems that we face today within the electrical infrastructure of heavy duty trucking. So that's been really nice to see.
Just to clarify for people, in your case, BEV meant battery electric vehicle.
Yeah.
As opposed to the beverage
Yes.
industry, which uses BEVs to make deliveries. You mentioned, discharge levels, and I have an electric vehicle, a Mustang, and, I try to keep it to 40% to 85% in order to keep it healthy for future recharging. My watch is set up to be able to track what it's doing for cycles for longevity. My son just took delivery Saturday of a Rivian Gen 2 R1S.
Awesome. That's a beautiful,
huge honking battery in that
yeah.
thing. And I'm not sure what the latest would be with the lithium iron phosphate. What's the typical standard for how deep a discharge you should go and how high a charge you should go?
Yeah, so it really depends on the rates of charging as well and rate of discharging. It's not simply
But the chargers are usually smart enough now to
They are.
take care of that.
That they are 100%. So we, in our information that we put out there and when we're talking to customers, we are perfectly comfortable within our specification of being able to discharge all the way down to 100% or 0%. With the caveat that we're doing that within the spec. And then on the charge rate, we advise no more than half a C charge rate. Our batteries, if you buy a 100 amp hour battery from Dragonfly Energy, that battery actually is sitting at about 108 to 110 amp hours. So even when our BMS triggers a shutdown, there's still a little bit of reserve capacity inside of that pack that's powering that BMS in order to be able to wake it up once it sees a 12-volt charge source that's coming to it. So it's not true that it goes all the way down to zero, but we don't have any problem in our applications of customers draining their batteries all the way to that BMS shutdown. For longevity, as you identified, a battery loves to be right there in the middle. It loves to be in that 40 to 80, 85% range. That's, you could, we warranty our batteries for 3,000 to 5,000 cycles, right? And
That's full cycles.
full cycles. Yeah. Full cycles.
Many
And
more partial cycles would be allowed.
Yes, correct. If you were using your battery always in that 40 to 85% zone and never let it get out of there, the battery's going to last an incredibly long time, far more than 5,000 cycles.
So before we finish, what did I forget to ask that you want to get across to people who are in business, who have to learn to simplify things, to find a better way and trust? What do you recommend? What did I forget to ask?
I would just say that there's always going to be really hard parts of your business, and it'll at times, I think it seems like I'm taking a step backwards, but then I realize after 25 plus years of doing this that it's only setting you up for the next larger step. And so don't get discouraged. I think in today's world of kind of instant gratification, we may get easily discouraged. I see it in my own children, and I would encourage people to make sure that they're sticking to the grind. I encourage my sales team to don't just because they said no, like there's stuff to learn from them saying no. Like, why did they say no? And listen to that. And then that way we can fix the product for the next evolution of it, or we can make sure that those no's are being addressed in the next client call. Right. So
sometimes it's just a matter of timing.
It is.
I've been fighting ants in the kitchen for 2 months. Somebody did the classic walking door to door with pest control services. And I said, yes. I didn't do any research, nothing, didn't do anything. Just, yes, you can do it today. Do it.
You're hired. Yeah, absolutely. Timing is everything. You're absolutely right on that. Both good and bad timing.
So if people want to follow up with Wade Seaberg or Dragonfly Energy, what do they do?
I'm available on LinkedIn, just Wade Seaberg. I think I'm one of the few out there with that name combination, or Wade at dragonflyenergy.com is a great way to reach me. And if you're interested on the company, dragonflyenergy.com is where you'll see more information on the company itself.
Well, great. It's been good having you, Wade, and getting into having battery storage available to us to keep us air conditioned.
Yeah.
Europe might want some of that right now.
They may. Yeah, there's a heat wave going on over there.
Yeah.
So
take care. Thanks,
right.
Everybody, for being part of this edition of Business Accelerants Memos. You've heard the challenges, the triumphs, and/or the tools and strategies. Now it's time to apply them. Thanks for joining us on Business Accelerants Memos. For show notes and more tools designed for middle market leaders, visit us at www.businessaccelerants.com. Until the next dispatch, keep your momentum high and continue to accelerate your success.